Welcome to a shorter version of the Mallen Baker, Tom Nelson climate discussion from earlier this week. The initial one ran 2 hours, 21 minutes, and I got a lot of feedback saying that there was too much filibustering in there, and I do agree. So in this version, I cut out 99 minutes, and this is a snappier 42 minutes or so. One thing I wanted to mention is that Mallen kept talking about Southern Europe data that was so compelling that heat waves are getting worse in Southern Europe. And I looked it up. This is the graph that he's talking about, which it starts in 1950. He doesn't like the Central England temperature record because it doesn't show what he wants, but he loves this temperature record, which has a cherry-picked start date of 1950, and it does show what he wants it to show. Interesting.
I looked at his channel, and it was an echo chamber. My channel is not an echo chamber.
Let's put a pin in that echo chamber thing for now. So we agree we should not scare children about this because I think it is evil that if kids are not sleeping at night because they're afraid for their future, or if they're not studying because they're thinking, what's the point? I don't have a future anyway. We both agree that is evil to scare kids like that, correct?
Yes, I think there's a gray area.
Yeah, and how about this whole idea of blocking traffic or gluing yourself to stuff or smashing glass on the Magna Carta or all this other stuff, throwing soup on paintings? Are you in favor of any of that, or what do you think?
So there's two ways of looking at that.
Another point of agreement I think I found between you and I is that the whole target's like a guardrail of 1.5 C over pre-industrial or 2.0 C. The whole idea of those guardrails, or I don't know if you believe in tipping points at those exact guardrail spots. What do you think?
This is really just the difference between looking at what the mainstream climate science community is saying and then the way that it's being talked about politically and within the media and with a few campaigning scientists.
Just as an aside there, in the ClimateGate emails, Phil Jones said the 2.C degree limit was, quote, plucked out of thin air. He admitted that privately, and I think we agree that probably was kind of plucked, that there's nothing magical about 2.0. But I would like to talk about it a little later, whether we know that a little bit of warming from here is actually bad for us. Like 1.6 is worse than 1.5, but let's put a pin in that one for now. What else can we agree on before we start going on to the disagreement parts? Do you think, do you think people are willing to take a downgrade in their lifestyles in order to fight this? They think the problem is that big that they're willing to give up some of their money and freedom in order to try to prevent bad weather in the future?
There is no way that belief in a scientific proposition should fall along party political lines.
Yeah, for a lot of people, that is the case. For me, absolutely not. I started out believing in this thing until I looked at the evidence. So evidently my ideology or whatever did not prevent me from believing it. I did believe until I looked at the evidence. I don't know about how did this go for you? Did you ever have a time when you didn't believe, or you looked at the evidence and then you did, or how did it go for you?
I started generally accepting what the scientific headlines.
I want to back up and talk about this whole echo chamber thing, that you see my channel as an echo chamber and yours as not. But I'm wondering how many climate realists like me have appeared long form on your channel? Because I have had Jeff Price appeared, Gerald Kootenai a couple of times, and then I've invited Michael Mann and Gavin Schmidt. I've invited tens of people from the other side to be on there and lay out their case, but they won't do it. For whatever reason, they won't be on my podcast. I would have tons of people from what we're calling your side, but they don't want to do it.
No.
You see, what do you mean? No.
I am not on a side.
You see me as on a side, but you're not on a side.
That's right.
Who exactly are you talking about when you say your side? Who exactly are you talking about? Are you specifying who is my side exactly? What do they believe?
As far as I could tell from Climate the Movie, there were at least 3 and maybe 4 distinct propositions of what might be happening instead of human-caused climate change. You know, that it's not happening at all, or that it's only happening.
No. That was not in the movie. Nope, that's your misinterpretation of the movie. There's nothing in the movie saying that the Earth has not warmed since 1850 or since 1975.
Okay.
I don't know any skeptic who does not believe that the Earth has warmed. I'm sure those people are out there. But it's very common on my side. Of course, during the Little Ice Age, it was colder. Of course, during the global cooling scare in the 70s, it was colder. It has warmed since then. It has also cooled since other points in the past.
Okay, so showing graphs and saying this, here's the Central England graph, and it shows practically no warming, and
it shows some warming. It shows some warming.
And here's Central Park, New York, which shows no particular warming
since the 1940s.
It gives an impression. But okay, fine.
Nope.
So you're clear that's not intentional.
No. It's not. We didn't say it.
But then you've got other versions, which is about, yes, there's warming, but it's mostly to do with the urban heat island effects.
We didn't say mostly. Maybe half. We said maybe half.
Okay.
When you were doing your debunking, we said it was because of urban heat island, but we never said it's all of it. But some of it is because of the urban heat island effect. Yes, some, not all.
Okay. What do you personally believe?
I believe Earth's climate is incredibly complex, and I think no one knows exactly what caused the Minoan warm period and the Roman warm period. What caused the medieval warm period, Little Ice Age? We know it fluctuated a lot. We know even in the 20th century, it fluctuated a lot. And we have ideas. Cosmic rays may be part of it. There's all sorts of ideas, but we don't know. It's not one thing. It's incredibly complex, and nobody on either side, or whatever you want to call it, we don't understand it. But what we do know is that CO2 isn't the climate control knob. It's not the climate control knob. And the Earth isn't too warm. There's no evidence to support that the weather is getting worse. Pretty much, I mean, everything that you hear that is alarming about the climate, there's not evidence to support it. The climate is just fine. And the whole idea that warming from here is going to make our life worse, there's no evidence for that either. Warm periods have always been better for humans and life on Earth than cold periods. So the whole idea that if it warms another 2/10 from here, my life is going to get worse, or life in general for the average person, that's going to get worse, the evidence does not support that.
So I'm interested that you slipped from talking about what's causing warming to then some of these other questions, because...
Okay, but I'm saying we don't know what caused it. We don't know what caused the warming since 1975. You don't know. We don't know.
How is it, I'm interested in this, how is it that you are so uncertain about all of these various factors that are flowing around? You're so uncertain about, therefore, what's creating warming. And yet the one point of certainty that you're definitely signed up to is that it can't be human caused.
It can't.
All of these other things are uncertain.
Yeah,
but this one you're certain about. Why?
Yeah, we are certain about this one because the correlation between CO2 and Earth's temperatures is not there at all. As we look at it, even in the 20th century, your hypothesis is that more CO2 means warmer temperatures. That's the hypothesis, and it's not borne out at all. And you can look back as far as you want at any time scale, and CO2 has never been the climate control knob. So that one thing we do know. We don't know what caused all these fluctuations, but the whole idea that if we know how much CO2 is in the air, we know how warm the Earth is. No, we don't. We have enormous amounts of evidence that is not what's happening, that it's not CO2 as the climate control knob. It is a factor. It's one of many, many factors. But the whole idea that we know what's going to happen, that it's going to warm between now and 2100, if CO2 goes up, we know the temperatures are going to go up. We don't know that. You and I might, people alive right now might easily see 30 years of cooling, even though CO2 goes up, because all sorts of things are happening that we don't understand. We can't predict it.
You've introduced this phrase of CO2 as being the control knob, but your side is kind of fixated on this phrase.
Okay, hold on here. Just let me say one thing here. I'm looking at a paper right now in Science. It's written by Gavin Schmitz and Lasis, and the title of this paper is Atmospheric CO2. Principal control knob.
No, that's right.
Temperature. Yeah.
It was Schmidt's paper that used that phrase as an analogy to try.
But don't you think a lot of politicians, kids, et cetera, absolutely believe this, that it is the principal control knob, and that's why they're devoting their life to fighting CO2, because they think that that's what's happening? But we're both agreeing that's not the truth.
So what we're not allowing here is the nuance of being able to say the thing that is out of balance at the moment.
I'm sorry, how is it out of balance? Because for most of the last 600 million years, there's been way more CO2 there than now. How is it out of balance? We're way closer to the low point of that time than the high point of that time. We had thousands of ppm CO2, and very rarely have we had as little CO2 out there as we have right now. So this whole idea, it's out of balance and there's something bad going on because there's too much CO2, or the atmosphere is filling with CO2. You don't believe that, do you?
Back in 1974, Kissinger made speeches
Let's go back to what the CIA said in 1974 about climate. Quote, they said, the warmer climate we have enjoyed in recent decades was extremely favorable for agriculture. The climate of the 1800s was far less favorable to agriculture in most areas of the world. Extensive monsoon failures were common around the world, end quote, when it was cold. So this whole idea that we've always known that warm is bad for humans, again, it's wrong. We were worried about cooling because it was cooling in the 70s. So what do you think is the worst thing that has happened to humans? The worst thing because of the warming since like 1975?
Well, let me respond to your central point before I sort of rise to the bait of your question. Because that is a baiting question. We have some places in the world at the moment where they already experience warm periods that are on the edge of human tolerance.
But there are places where there's cold periods, right?
Absolutely.
Cold kills a lot more people than heat. So why are we worried about just where it's too warm? Why aren't we worried about where it's too cold?
American graphs are always the ones that are being shown rather than Asia, rather than Southern Europe, where trends have started to already emerge.
America is where we have the data. We have the data. If you look at a map of where the thermometers were in 1900, it's heavily concentrated in the U.S. The whole idea that there's a global warming crisis, but it missed the U.S. where we have the thermometers, I'm not buying that at all.
This is exactly analogous to the joke about the man who's looking for his key. And he's looking under the lamp because that's where the light is, even though it's not where he dropped his keys.
So,
we expect to see the trend in Asia. We expect to see the trend in Southern Europe. Yes, you've got more weather stations in places where we don't expect to see the trend. Well, guess what? They don't show yet.
Wait a minute. Why don't we expect to see warming in North America? Why wouldn't we expect to see that? It's global warming. Well, why not? It's where we have the data. This whole fake invisible catastrophes. We don't have the data that shows that there's a crisis, but in places where we don't have the data, that's where the crisis is. Like there's a problem in the Great Barrier Reef. You and I are not going to go check out to see if there really is a problem. It's the whole Patrick Moore thing with the fake invisible crises. Because as we all look around, if we look at real data from anywhere, there's no crisis anywhere. But we have to believe somewhere else where we don't really have the data. That's where the crisis is. But let's talk about, is there even a crisis right now? Are we experiencing?
Who said that there was going to be a catastrophe today in North America? Who said that?
A lot of people are saying there's a catastrophe right now. We're getting that from the media. We're getting it that there's we're living in the crisis right now, and people are exposed to that. But let's talk about the model saying that Antarctica should warm faster than the rest of the world. That is absolutely not happening. The models are wrong. Antarctica is not warming faster than the rest of the world. For long periods of time, it hasn't been warming at all. So the whole idea that there's a crisis, but it's skipping North America and it's skipping Central England, where we have the longest instrumental record that we have anywhere, and it's also skipping Antarctica. I think you dismissed the medieval warm period because you think that wasn't global. Like, can't we dismiss this because this isn't global either? And another point I'd like to make is that if the models are right, we've been emitting CO2 for a long time. We've run this experiment, and CO2 has gone up from maybe 280 to maybe a little over 420. We've run this experiment, so then now we can see it's been going on for hundreds of years. We can see whether it's right. Are we getting accelerated warming because of this? And no, we're not. We're seeing all sorts of fluctuations in temperature, even within that period when we allegedly raised it from 280 to 420. So we were running the experiment, and we're not finding out that the narrative is bearing out in reality. It's not happening. It's a very important point that you just made that we agree on. That's a huge point that we both agree on, that what is said in the media very often, the headlines in the media are very often way more alarming than what's in the science. That's a huge point of agreement. That might be our biggest point of agreement. So I want to make a distinction. You talk as if just Extinction Rebellion is saying crazy stuff. And you mentioned the whole global boiling thing, and I actually looked up a few of those things. You said literally nobody is saying that the planet is actually going to boil. And we both know that the UN chief, Guterres, said the era of global boiling has arrived. So
yes, but completely. We know. Come on, Tom. Yeah. I think that was a stupid thing for him to say.
100% stupid.
We know that he didn't say that because he literally thought the oceans were going to reach 100 degrees C. I mean, it was an analogy. It was an attempt to use evocative language. It was stupid. We can call it stupid, but he didn't literally believe that the planet was boiling.
Let's go on to James Hansen, right? The kind of the father of climate science. He said that you can get to a situation where just the oceans will begin to boil. He actually said that, and I think he seriously was believing that at some point the oceans would boil. He said it more than once. And then Stephen Hawking said that Trump's action on climate could push Earth over the brink to become like Venus, with a temperature of 250 degrees and raining sulfuric acid. The LA Times talked also about boiling the oceans. So this rhetoric is so crazy, and it's not coming just from Extinction Rebellion. What do you say to that?
So there was a short period of time where certain climate scientists had put forward the idea of runaway climate change, which is where the Venus thing comes from. Very quickly, the mainstream climate community said, no, that isn't a thing. If we don't know, that is a case to really feel that we need to know more, surely, not just as an argument for doing nothing.
I'm happy to know more, but then there's all these crazy things that we should give up meat and eat the bugs and live in 15-minute cities and glue ourselves to stuff and never fly again. All this completely crazy stuff to try to prevent bad weather in the future, with this whole assumption that the weather has gotten worse. Cyclones are worse now and droughts are worse. There's all these assumptions that are wrong. We've been emitting CO2 all this time, and none of that, the bad stuff is happening. There's no evidence. Do you think that there is evidence that the warming since 1975 has made our lives worse?
I'm just slightly taken aback because of your reference to eating the bugs and 15-minute cities. Mm-hmm. Do you think someone's telling you to eat bugs?
I mean, we're hearing that. We're seeing that in the media, that we might have to eat bugs to prevent bad weather. We're seeing that. Are you not seeing that? I'm seeing it.
Okay. So you're saying that we see in the media scare stories about climate, and those are definitely not true. And you're seeing in other media that somebody out there is going to force you to eat bugs, but you're choosing to believe that. Why?
Why am I choosing to believe it? I'm just saying it's in the media. It's in the media that we have to give up meat. We got to have a meat-free Monday at schools to prevent bad weather. We shouldn't be eating the cheeseburgers. There's people that feel guilty when they eat a cheeseburger. You see that on Twitter. Do you feel guilty if you eat a cheeseburger? No. Are you suggesting that no one out there, there's no Bill Gates type out there that would like to restrict our travel, maybe some sort of a carbon credit system where we can only travel a certain amount of time per year, a certain number of flights per year, or a certain number of clothes? We can buy like three new pieces of clothing. There's actually a document that talks about getting rid of flying, and we can't buy too many clothes, and we can't eat too much meat. And there's all these types of ways to restrict our freedom. Are you suggesting that no one is planning anything like that? And as far out in the future, we can all fly as much as we want, eat as much meat as we want, turn up our thermostat. There's no restrictions on our freedom being planned for us in the name of climate change? Because I'm seeing tons of proposals about this. If no one is proposing any of this, then I'm happier than I was.
Of course, there are people out there thinking like this. There are people out there thinking like all sorts of things, including that the WEF is a global conspiracy to subjugate the world.
Maybe you don't know about the C40 Cities document. I'm looking at it right now. It's an official document of mayors. This is the things they want to do to prevent climate change. It's a long document. It's completely freaking insane. And I think you might even agree with me when you look at this thing. It's not journalists saying that they're saying, I'm looking at it right now, their progressive target for us. They have consumption interventions for food for us. Their progressive target, 16 kilograms of meat per year per person. Their ambitious target written right here, 0 kilograms of meat for you per year. That's what they want to do to prevent bad weather. Same with dairy. By 2030, these people want you to have consumed 0 kilograms of dairy per year. Do you agree it's insane?
Okay, I would
crazy stuff.
I would need to see that and understand where it's come from, because unfortunately, I can't take as a reliable narrator either side of this polarized discourse. As you've described it there, it sounds highly unfeasible that anyone would vote for it or implement it. Why, as a politician, would you see that as an attractive thing that you would want to jump onto?
some politicians clearly do see it as an attractive thing, posing as someone who is saving human civilization. So they can make the grand promises now. They just don't want to be around when we actually have to do all this crazy stuff in order to try to meet their targets. So there was Obama saying, I think in 2008, that this is the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow. Like if we elect him, we're going to be able to control global sea levels. And of course, Gore, you can still call him a politician maybe in 2000 and whatever, 6 or 7, when he was posing as the guy who's saving us all. So people do like to pose. They like to think of themselves as world saviors. So there is something about that, but they don't want to be around when the pain hits. You talked about this, right? And I agree. We have an invisible future benefit with a current visible cost. So nobody wants the pain of going through all of these crazy C40 cities types of things. People do want to pose as the saviors of the world. And by the way, I just emailed you. I emailed you a link to the C40 cities thing in case you think I'm not telling you the truth, so you can pull it up yourself. And I want to talk about your position as a centrist. You have, and maybe now you're working in the field of sustainability, right? Helping companies with, I think you said on a different podcast, maybe half of your work had something to do with helping companies meet their climate commitments, something about climate. I'm just wondering, do you see yourself as someone who approached Climate the movie when you're ready to watch it with a completely open mind and you were open to the idea that there is no problem with CO2 causing a crisis or anything, a completely open mind, or did you have any preconceptions going in?
I've done a lot of work with businesses over the last 20 years.
Okay. So about our movie that we worked hard on, and we sincerely think we're doing the best we can to present the truth as we see it. You said the movie, quote, spends all its time making truly garbage statements about the science of climate, end quote. Do you want to back off on that at all? Or do you think we really spent all 80 minutes making truly garbage statements about it?
I'm afraid I do, yes.
So you're claiming that there's long-running temperature stations, there's long records elsewhere in the world that do show something alarming happening with the climate. I'm not aware of those. I would like to see those. I want to see these mythical mythical data records showing that there is something happening in like Central Asia. You really think there's records that go back maybe to the 1700s or something, and they show something, say, correlation with CO2 and temperature? I don't think those exist. I've been involved in this debate for close to 20 years, and I've never seen them. Do they exist?
You're suddenly putting a whole bunch of additional criteria onto evidence that he's now got to go back to 1750.
Well, that's why we use Central England, is because it's our longest running temperature record. If there is a signal, it should show up there. You're saying because of some reason, we let's throw that out. I think the reason you want to throw it out is because it doesn't agree with
that is exactly an example of garbage science, because again, we are back to thing. The models say that we don't expect to see that trend appearing in Central England.
Wait a minute, they say that? The models say we don't expect to see global warming in Central England? That's what they say? I've never seen that either. They say we shouldn't see it in Central Park or North America?
Not in extreme terms. It's that we expect to see certain things happening more. So if we have an event that happens once every 100 years and we now expect to see it once every 10 years, you've got graphs that the end bit where you see the warming has been missed out. I mean, come on, really?
What graph are you talking about?
So there was
Central England?
No, there was.
While looking that up, let me read something else that you said. You said that emitting CO2 is, quote, like adding steroids to the weather. And you also said climate change is making heat waves in India 100 times more likely. So what evidence do we have that heat waves in India are 100 times more likely now than they ever have been? I think these are absolutely garbage statements that you've made, and I need you to back those up.
Where did I say those?
I will provide you with the, I don't know, I have it right here. It's definitely a quote from you. Climate change is making heat waves in India 100 times more likely, within quotes. You don't believe that? Because you did say that.
So I generally consider myself to be more of an expert on what I believe and what I've said than other people.
Did you say that climate change or that emitting CO2 is, quote, like adding steroids to the weather? Did you deny saying that one?
I seem to recall quoting somebody who said that. So I believe there was a context for those.
Okay. What was?
Because those are not my words.
Okay, and you don't believe those words?
Well, those are not my words, and I don't remember, but I do remember they do ring a bell. So I think I was quoting somebody, and I need to know what you're quoting in context there, Tom, to be honest.
Well, you don't believe those. Do you believe those now?
I don't have an opinion on, so I don't have the data in front of me.
Okay. Why would climate models say that we are expecting alarming warming in Africa, but not in central England and not in the US? Why would they say that? And what data does tell us that there is alarming warming going on in Africa? How fast is it warming? Where is it? What's the data?
So, first of all, we do know from the models that the changes will happen differently across the world. We have a complex climate. We know the poles are going to warm faster.
Except Antarctica is not warming faster, right? It is, and that's absolutely not happening. What you think is happening, it's not. Antarctica is not warming faster. So right there, that is a huge problem if we're going to trust the models, if they think Antarctica is going to be warming faster, because it's not.
Let's come back to that in a second. Why would you insist that it has to be simple or else somehow it fails your test?
I am absolutely not insisting that. Climate is not simple. I don't know who's saying that, but it's not me. I've never said climate is simple. It's incredibly complex.
So why isn't it not possible then that the climate models would show that certain areas will see the signs of warming earlier?
I think it's possible, but I'm asking what evidence? We've been emitting CO2 for 200 years. What's the actual evidence that that is happening? It's possible. I don't think Africa can continue to warm faster than everywhere else forever. That can't happen. At some point, there's got to be some regression to the mean. At what point do you think that the North America is going to start warming alarmingly? If it's not now, when should it?
You've even quoted someone in the movie saying even the IPCC admits that that's not going to happen, as though they're somehow shamefully admitting something they don't think to admit.
Here's something funny. I really enjoyed this whole admits thing because you said, oh, we use the word admit, and that's not a word you should be using because it's kind of projecting on other people that that we don't trust them or something. But right after that, you said that we admitted. You used that word, you put it right back on us, that you used the word admit against us. So you did exactly the thing that you said that we were being kind of nefarious or something for using.
What was the context?
Within a 2-minute period. And one of your
things. Because it may have depended on, there's got to be a context there. If I made my own mistake, I'll hold my hands up, but I need to know exactly what it was I said.
Okay, I have the entire context here. You said, Will Happer said, the IPCC admits it. And you said notice for framing, they admitted. It's not that they know it, they openly stated in the report, because what the research says, they admit it. Hinting that they really wish it wasn't that way, but you know that they'll grudgingly accept reality. I suppose it pushed to do so by heroic doubters and skeptics. This is the framing that you're being sold here. The IPCC says we don't expect more hurricanes. The data shows we're not seeing. Then right after that, you said the movie has admitted that the planet might just be warming. So right after that, within 2 minutes, you said there's some sort of nefariousness about Will Happer saying admit. But then right after that, by mistake, you said that we, the filmmakers, admit it. So this is something that people do. You criticized us for doing something, and then right after that, you did exactly the same thing. People do that. I make mistakes too, but you did that in your debunking. You did it. What has been the worst thing that has happened since 1975 because of the warming, in your view? Maybe you think that there hasn't been a lot of things yet, but in the future, it sounds like in the future you're worried about bad things happening. But do you think they're happening right now? Really bad things happening globally right now because of the warming since 1975?
So you're trying to project a certainty onto me that I have no interest in having.
Okay.
Of course, there have been all sorts of bad climate events over the recent decade or two.
Yep. Weather events, right?
And
don't you mean weather events?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we're agreeing again then that I don't think the solution, even if we think even if we think that heat waves are going to get worse, which I don't think we have evidence that they have gotten worse, but even if we think that, should we try to prevent the heat waves somehow, or should we adapt to it and make sure that they have a reliable power sources, maybe even coal-fired plants or something? They need to adapt by having air conditioning somehow. And the whole idea that they should run their air conditioners on wind turbines and solar panels. I mean, we shouldn't even talk about the green energy thing. Probably that's a whole other thing. But adaptation is important. Yeah.
Let's dive into.
Okay.
That,
all right.
Because we have no fear in this discussion.
Let's do it.
So, first of all, I think if you look at all of the different areas, if you look at the data, there are trends in relation to heat waves.
Well, what are those trends? Because like where we have the data in the U.S., the heat waves in the 1930s were way worse. That's where we have the data.
Yeah, but
this is data from elsewhere showing the heat waves getting worse. Tell me where that data is. I want to see that.
I showed one graph for Southern Europe in one of my videos responding to so there's one.
So that's one.
There are similar trends in parts of particularly Southeast Asia. But
how long?
North America. So North America is not the world. I mean, I don't know how
Southern Asia is not the world. Southern Asia is not the world. You should know that.
No,
by
absolutely.
now.
But it is where we expect to see the trends first.
We expect to see heat waves there, but we don't expect to see heat waves.
Under. Of course, the challenge with you saying that is you don't want it to happen at all.
I'm not saying that.
And I'm
saying we don't want to run. I don't want my state to. I don't want people telling Minnesota, you have to run this state on wind and solar, and that's it. Because enormous amounts of people will die. They would actually die if we actually tried that crazy experiment. So I'm totally fine with nuclear power. I think that's probably going to be the long-term way to go. I think we have a lot of agreement on energy here that we need reliable baseload energy. I was going to ask you about, should we I think it's crazy to ban the internal combustion engine by 2030, or bureaucrats thinking they're going to prevent bad weather by forcing us all into electric cars. And that somehow is going to provide a payback in reduced bad weather. Do you agree that banning internal combustion engines anytime soon is crazy?
So I'm going to ignore the campaign phrase, because the forcing people into cars to prevent bad weather, that's campaign language.
Okay, I'll rephrase it.
I understand what you meant. The issue with the hole in the ozone layer, and governments agreed worldwide to ban CFCs.
The whole idea that CFCs are the ozone hole control knob, I think that is absolutely not proven, but go on.
I would expect nothing else of you, Tom.
I would push back at this whole idea that people like me who don't believe that human activity is the main cause of climate change, that we're some sort of a fringe group or way out on the fringes. Because I don't know if you just saw this Monmouth poll that just came out. They asked Americans, what do you think about this issue? And 34% of them, only 34%, saw human activity as the main cause of climate change. That means 66% didn't even buy into that much of it. I think there's a big awakening happening right now in recent years where people are not believing experts. They're not blindly trusting the experts anymore. They've been lied to over and over, big time, by the media and by the alleged experts. And then they're not trusting the experts anymore. You can definitely see this shift. There's podcasters like Joe Rogan, and you see on Tucker Carlson and on Jordan Peterson and all elsewhere, maybe even Russell Brand, that people are questioning the experts. And when the climate change thing comes up now, they're starting to scoff at it. There's some movement away from the alarmism. I'm for sure seeing that. I know there's people that have dug in and they've dedicated their lives to this, and they're going to take this to their grave. But I think the normal people, the actual voters, they are absolutely not going to take any decrement in their lifestyle. They're not going to pay more than a tiny amount of money for this thing because they're not believing in it. And I think even the people who say they believe in it, they're not willing to not fly or change their lifestyle in any way. Almost nobody can be bothered to behave as if they truly believe in this. So do you have any comment on this about the general idea that the public is all in on net zero? I think bureaucrats are, but the public, they're not in on this. And I don't think they ever are because the evidence is so flimsy.
So that's exactly the interpretation of the data that I would expect you to take.
Yeah, that's the correct interpretation.
If there was a big climate event that strikes close to home,
A weather event. We're talking about a weather event, right? It's not a climate event. It's a weather event. Right?
But it comes down to how people understand it. So you all want to make that fine distinction.
Those events have happened throughout human history. Every single year, as far as we know, there's been bad weather. If you read in history, people are always stunned by what just happened. They've never seen this happen before. So the whole idea that bad weather is any indicator that CO2 causes bad weather, it's not. So your prediction is, as that time goes on, people will wake up to your side. They'll see, oh no, the weather is getting worse. And the polls will show that they're shifting to your side because the weather just keeps getting worse. And now we believe that CO2 must be causing the weather to get worse. That's what you're predicting is going to happen? Because I'm predicting that's not going to happen.
Again, I don't have a side. When we first started to see a few weather events that people did worry about, which I think was around about the time of Al Gore's wretched movie, The Inconvenient Truth.
Wait a minute. You're saying that the people weren't worried about weather events before that?
There was, I recall that there were a couple of things that happened that got a little wave of concern, certainly across the UK.
So if we were to experience a period of rapid natural global cooling, do you think that would be good for us, A? And if not, do you think we should try to emit CO2 and to try to prevent that climate change by trying to artificially heat it up to try to maintain a stable temperature? Is there anything humans can do to maintain a stable temperature, or is it going to continue to fluctuate regardless of what we do?
So, so many things wrapped up in that. Clearly, we don't expect to see a period where we suddenly get cooling.
Are you ruling it out?
I'm not expecting that to happen.
Okay. Would it be good? I don't know if you answered that part of it. Would that make the weather better if the Earth were to cool by, let's say, 0.5 degree C? Because we're led to believe that the last 0.5 degree C has made the weather worse. That cooling back down, would that make the weather better? Less droughts, less floods, et cetera?
Now, this whole thing about, well, how warm should it be? How cold should it be? Is utterly irrelevant to me.
How rapid do you think this current climate change is? We're told that it's rapid, but compared to what? Like over the last 30 or 50 years, how rapid has the climate change been? And how do we know that humans have not experienced hundreds or thousands of other periods over the last 200,000 years? There's a lot of sliding 30-year periods. How do we know how fast the climate was changing on a 30-year period 10,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago? How do we know that?
It seems to me there are certain discussions that turn into how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
So you think bad weather is evidence that CO2 causes bad weather? Well, we need to know if is it outside what we've seen in the past? Is it warming faster than we've seen in the past? We don't know that.
CO2,
we know it must be humans because it's so fast, because it happened so slow in the past. But that's made up. That's garbage science. Completely made up.
But it's only garbage science because you create a straw man out of it, saying, oh, CO2 causes bad weather. Weather is caused by many different factors.
I know.
What we have is a changing element, which is the amount of CO2 and therefore global warming, which then changes the way that all the other parameters are interacting together. So things that used to reliably happen in one place, like the monsoon in India, for instance.
Did they ever reliably happen, though? Do we have evidence that it was reliable the last 1,000 years? We could set our clocks by when it happened? No.
Not according to the clock. But the point is that when there was unreliability, it was a problem for human societies. And if we're going to artificially create that, exacerbate that unreliability, that's a problem.
How do we know that the weather is any more unreliable now than it ever has been in the past? How do we know that? Maybe it's more reliable now. We don't know. It's unpredictable. How do we know this?
That is a bold statement on its face.
I mean, this whole idea that adding additional CO2 in the atmosphere is going to cause lower crop yields is crazy. It's completely crazy. The Earth has been greening. NASA admits that the Earth has been greening because CO2, I know you don't like that, do they? They do admit that. CO2...
grudgingly through clenched teeth.
CO2 is plant food. People add additional CO2 in greenhouses. They pay to add additional CO2 because it makes the plants grow better. I know you're going to talk about C3
so-
versus C4. But if you look at our world in data, the yields just keep going up. The whole idea that, oh no, the crops are going to fail because there's more CO2 in the air, that is not what's happening. That does not make any sense. Longer growing seasons and more CO2 out there, that helps our crops to grow. There are lots of other reasons why yields are going up, but the whole idea that, oh no, we need less CO2 in the air, that's going to be good for our crops, that doesn't make any sense. There's no scientific backing for it.
I haven't heard anyone put it exactly like that.
Well, you're kind of suggesting let's worry about our crops because maybe 420 ppm CO2 is bad for crops. Are you not saying that? You're thinking, are you agreeing with me that it's probably good for crops?
No, it isn't irrational to say increased destabilization of the climate produces potential for real problems in that area.
Yep, I completely disagree. There's no evidence whatsoever that CO2 causes increased destabilization of the climate. There's no evidence of that at all. Another thing about the arable land is that when I was talking about crop yields, that is on a per acre or per unit area. It's not because we're farming more land, that's why. I'm talking about crop yields per unit of area, and those are going up. And I completely disagree that we're, by the way, on the edge of farming all the arable land on Earth. I think I've heard you say that elsewhere. I think there's just tons of arable land still that we're not farming. We have golf courses. We got all sorts of stuff going on. We're not farming. We're in the U.S. We're paying people not to put to farms in some places, the soil bank and et cetera. There's a lot of arable land left in Africa that we're not farming. So anyway, the idea that we're going to go hungry because of additional CO2, I reject that 100%.
If you believe that, well, that doesn't matter because global warming isn't a thing, well, fine. But if for the rest of us...
No one is saying that global warming isn't a thing. I think it's pretty clear that warming from here, even a degree or 2 degrees warming from here would increase the amount of arable land. You could farm in places in Canada where you can't farm now because the growing season is too short. So cold is the enemy of farming in general, and warmth is good for farming. And the whole idea that global cooling, if we want to go back to the Little Ice Age because that would be good for farmers, no, it wouldn't. That would be very bad for farmers. Are you clear about the fact that your models that you like say that the warming near the equator should be moderate compared to much more warming further away from the equator? So we could have a warmer world where the tropics don't warm very much, but Canada, where we want the warming, that does warm more. That's what's supposed to be happening. It's not supposed to warm more where it's really hot at the equator.
I don't see why you wouldn't frame your public policy going forwards on that sort of looking at the whole rather than just the bits that you want to see.
Isn't there an enormous amount of framing of public policy, though, looking at just the bad things? Like in Minnesota, we're constantly told that we don't want warming in Minnesota because it would be harder to play hockey outdoors on the hockey rinks. That's like the most important thing ever is outdoor hockey. We're not talking about how we could play a lot more golf and we could do a lot more construction and farming would be better. Huge advantages to warming here. No, we're fixated on it's outdoor hockey. That's the worst thing ever. And we have to pay enormous amounts of money and give up our freedom, blah, 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 because of outdoor hockey. You agree, right, that there's enormous amounts of propaganda fixated on just what bad thing could be caused by warming. Maybe we're going to get kidney stones. I've seen that over and over. It's going to be so warm, we're going to get kidney stones. And Dave Collins says, okay, I live near a lake. The temperature varies of 1 or 2 degrees, depending on how close you are to the lake. Do we have data that shows you get more kidney stones if you live in a slightly warmer place near the lake? Yeah, it's all baloney, of course. You got to agree with that. The kidney stone thing, come on.
So I think we would agree that there's a lot of nonsense out there.